Don't mind any noises you may hear in the background. I don't know what's going on out there. Like literally when we started, there was like gunshots going off or something. I don't know what is kind of
hunting
crazy.
Season in this part of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to the Escape News Podcast Season 2.
Welcome.
Woo! Yay, sound effects there, right? Today, starting off Season 2. So this story starts in 1931, roughly, and they were taking all these people in poorer counties, and they were trying to figure out if it was socioeconomic reasons that people would have syphilis going around in their communities. So the gist of what happened is that men were without treatment, and they were studying these people, and it was black men that had syphilis, and they would study them and then just not treat them and say that they were treating them. And throughout the whole study, these people didn't know that they weren't being treated. They thought they were being treated. And they were paid a little bit of money throughout their lifetime. There were some lawsuits that came out in the end. But some of the things that are just kind of crazy about the story is a lot of people will look at this and say that it's racist policies that started with this. And to some degree, that kind of came a little bit later in the study. There's a guy I was listening to, Jim Jones, and he has James H. Jones. He has a really big to-do with this story. Jim Jones secretly, to some degree, had an inside route and got some access to some documents and copied them, got federal seal, copied them. And the reason for that is because it was during the Nixon administration. We all trust them, of course.
Implicitly.
Nixon, yeah. Very trustworthy. What happened at the beginning was the Rosenwald Foundation invests in black education, and then they go on to invest in black health because they realize like that's part of it. They hire a few different people that names that you can know regarding this are Michael Davis, Taliaferro Clark. It's such a weird name and so hard to say. They were also saying like this is one of the most important diseases to work on, syphilis. So they picked 6 black communities in the South, and Macon County, Georgia was the poorest. And so they test for syphilis, and then they set up mobile clinics to treat everything. And then they release papers after a year and say syphilis is heavily linked to economic conditions. And then they say in 1931, we can do something about this. And then the Rosenwald Foundation at that point, it is the Great Depression, and they're like, look, we can't do anything else. Money's running dry. Most of the money that was from Sears and Roebuck stocks, and that's what like really fueled the Rosenwald Fund. And at that point, the Great Depression happened, and there wasn't much you can do about it. Yep. Then they pull out of the southern states, and Taliaferro Clark, who was interested in this, wanted to keep testing the untreated syphilis to figure out some things. And he's a bit devious, but one of the common misconceptions that you have with this study is that it was with racist motivations and an agenda in the beginning, which isn't true because you have from the beginning, there was black nurses, doctors, and educators that were invested in this that are all part of the teams knowingly treating or not treating these people and being part of the whole story. So that's something that a lot of people don't really know about. But to say that they didn't treat the people is not true either, because when the Rosenwald Foundation was in there, when they initially started, there was one of the guys who was the public health official down there and said, you are not allowed to just test these people. You can't just not treat them. So they had to give them some of the treatment. That is just part of the fact that they did give them some treatment, which means that the whole scientific aspect of it is just kind of useless. It's pointless. Like you're not studying untreated syphilis at that point. It was
that's not
crazy.
To watch the Nuremberg trials. I mean, I'm pretty afraid to do anything that would violate. I mean, people went hung for that kind of stuff.
I know. It was pretty crazy that the public health service told facilities in that area to not treat any of these people. They were not allowed to go to any of the other hospitals or the medical clinics and be treated. And then when you go outside of it, this experiment wasn't only done in America. The U.S. government actually did this in Guatemala too. So, without people knowing, and most of the people that I've read, they didn't survive to like getting any reparations or stuff like that for mistreatment of those people. The guy to do with Guatemala is Dr. Cutler. He intentionally infected children to test ways to find to treat it, which they already knew how to like treat it. So it's just ridiculous. There's other possible studies of this going on today, with whether it be syphilis or other things, but I'm still trying to dig around for information on that. And it's, like people don't want you to find out certain things. And I don't know how much I want to find out with it, like somebody showing up at my door.
Yeah. And they'll probably release a lot of it after the people who would be affected by it are dead. I was going to talk about AIDS in general, just the kind of the impacts that it had on our society and culture in general. AIDS is really just an autoimmune disease. The virus is actually HIV, and that causes AIDS. What HIV really does is it actually attacks your immune system. It attacks a lot of your other cells in your body. And what makes it very difficult for them to do anything about it is because it kind of inserts its DNA code into a cell and it hides out there until it replicates itself. And then it breaks out and infects a bunch more. So it's extremely difficult to, get rid of. And your immune system doesn't know what's going on because everything looks like a friend until it finally dies and releases a bunch more, right? So this destroys your immune system, and then it gives you the condition of AIDS, which is the autoimmune disease. When that happens, most people don't die directly because of AIDS or the HIV virus in general. I mean, they die because they get like a pneumonia or the common cold, and they have no immune system, so everything just falls apart.
That's kind of like old age.
Yeah, kind of. That's about it. Yeah, that's pretty true. HIV to this point is not really curable. Every day there's like someone's got a cure for it. It's kind of like diabetes. There's always a cure. Every couple months there's like someone had a breakthrough. You never see anything about it. I do know that there are some aggressive medical treatments that you can do if you were to get stuck. Like nurses do this. If they get stuck by a dirty needle where like the person who had used the needle was found to be HIV positive, and they can get it within the first couple of hours, something like that. They can get you through it. It's a pretty hectic and aggressive regimen of medications, but apparently it can do it. Like it can get you out of it. If you detect it early on, you can take retroviral drugs that kind of like mitigate its spread. It doesn't like get rid of it or I think it stops it or slows it down extremely, so you can kind of live with it. Ultimately, though, you probably just don't want to get it. I mean, really.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah, if you can just not get it in the first place, that's really ideal. So I want to talk a little bit more about the psychological thing about this was actually kind of almost more damaging, especially back in the 80s and 90s. No one had any clue, what any of this stuff was. People were just dying from it. Then you had this stigma against people like, oh, I can't touch you or I can't get near you. I don't want anything to do with you because I don't want to catch AIDS, or catch HIV. But that's not how it's transmitted. HIV does not last very long outside of a body. If it gets on a surface, it's dead within less than a minute. It does not survive well outside the body. Talking about I think it was in the 80s, the gay community had called the AIDS scare. And just to give you an idea, like back then, coming out as gay was a really big and significant deal. People just didn't do it, not publicly. You could very easily lose your job. You would lose all your friends. You would be ostracized from society. It was really bad. And so within the gay community, they were very close. You notice when people had issues. And so when AIDS started ripping through that community, your closest friends are now just dying off. No one knew what was going on. They just people were getting sick and dying. So there was a lot of paranoia around it. Like, oh, is the government trying to target people of the gay community and killing us off and all that kind of stuff? They were very skeptical of whatever people were talking about in regards to them. And it was really bad. So this kind of leads into a cultural aspect of this whole thing, which is really odd. I don't want to speak, obviously, for the gay community, but there is a subsect of the gay community, I assume a pretty small one, where they actually view HIV as a badge or rite of passage to be in obviously a subsect of the community. They're actually looking to pass on or have someone pass on to them HIV. Having it or being HIV positive, they feel is that's how I gain membership into this niche part of the community.
That feels like it would make your life worse because it's a disease and because it compromises your immune system and everything. That I don't understand that at all. Somebody will get a tattoo or branding. I feel like this is taking it to some kind of whole crazy level.
Like the Yakuza, they'll cut off a pinky, which that's kind of a one-way street. You don't just grow back a pinky. So you can kind of show your loyalty to the gang by doing something like that, or you get tattooed. So I watched a documentary about this. They surmised that it was because HIV had become synonymous with the gay community. If you were truly part of that community, you wanted to identify in that community, and so you would get HIV positive. A good portion of the gay community was like, no, we're not going to do this. But then there were still some who kind of felt differently, and they went and did stuff like this. So to me, it was a little fascinating to see it kind of go from this mass psychological thing that's really affecting people in a very big way. People are literally dying in the streets with this kind of stuff. And then it turned into some kind of cultural thing where people are looking to actually contract it. But you're talking about syphilis, no one really wanted syphilis. Turns your brain to Swiss cheese and you go insane. And then, now we have something else that's just killing people. You die. It's not a pretty death. I mean, you die from just common things.
The more we look at the world with these stories, it's just wow. our world's crazy.
Yeah.
People are crazy.
It's very irrational, but humans are irrational beings, so maybe it just fits. Exactly. I don't want it to.
Well, I hope you learned something today with this episode. Obviously, like as with all of our podcasts, don't trust the government. I mean, I feel like that's like a recurring theme. So make sure you stick around for the Escape News podcast. If you're on Patreon and supporting us, we thank you. Please like, subscribe, comment here. If you're on podcast, please give us a good review. And of course, on Patreon, if you're supporting us, go check us out in the Afterburner, and it's available now. And we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.